stay a while and listen. Inside Egosoft, number 2. Let's listen to that.
Hello everybody and welcome to
Hi, Greg.
episode 2 of the Inside Egosoft podcast.
It's a little bit
recording
quiet.
This on Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. Yeah, it's actually been 2 weeks since the first episode. Time flies.
Yes,
it's quite a weird year, isn't it? I told you in the trailer of the Inside Egosoft podcast that we intend to release an episode every 2 weeks. But that is definitely not set in stone. We'll see how feasible that is in the long run. Of course, there are phases when there's more to talk about and phases when there's less to tell. I hope we can find a good balance and perhaps expand the podcast in other forms in the future. Inviting some other people from outside of the company. We'll see. Simply to offer you an interesting additional form of content about Egosoft and...
Wait. People outside of the company? I'm a suitable person.
Our game, X4 Foundations. Before we jump into today's main topic, I wanted to give you some more general information about the upcoming 4.10 update, which the team has been working on for a while now. We've already talked about multiverse team seasons in episode 1 of this podcast, so you know that will be a part of it. If the multiverse team seasons will be in the first version of the 4.10 beta remains to be seen. That hasn't been finally decided so.
But they clearly said that this will be in 4.1. The first beta. Okay, we're talking about betas. Yeah, okay, okay, I can understand. If the 4.1 full release would be then with everything, but maybe not in the first beta.
As you may or may not know, we tend to update the beta versions frequently, so if it isn't in beta 1, it will surely be added to a later version of that 4.10 beta. Now another new element is today's main topic. We'll get to that in a minute. As usual, our free main game updates are not only introducing new gameplay features, but are mainly full of improvements as well as fixes. In episode 1, Bernd had mentioned already that a couple of behind-the-scenes improvements were going to be introduced in 4.10 that we weren't able to include in 4.0. Specifically, that's about changes to the engine, and in one particular case for 4.10, it's about improving the asset management in X4 Foundations. For you, the player, this should result in a better use of graphical memory, and it should improve things like asteroids popping in, among other things, of course.
Usage of graphical memory. Does anyone have issues with graphical memory? You do? On 3070 even, wow. Changes to the engine, but they can't really change the complete engine. But do they use a engine that's completely theirs? Lots of ships cause lots of problems. So maybe they go like further objects are maybe not rendered completely or something like that. Maybe they change the render size of objects that are not close by or whatever. Also, if they say that asteroids pop up way further, that means that it will be maybe a less good quality of an asteroid, but there will be more.
If you want to find out more already about the upcoming 4.10 beta, please visit our forum at forum.egosoft.com.
Link in the description down below.
In the general X4 forum, you will find a recent thread started by Bernd himself, listing elements that we plan to include, improve on, and fix. Just to be very clear, everything you will see in that thread is planned for the 4.10 beta. It doesn't mean that the final public 4.10 update will include all of these listed things.
What? Then why did you even do this list? I thought that this would be a list out of stuff that you already did and that you're just working on and that will be there. What the heck?
I mean, the beta is there for beta testing, right? So the team will have to see how the beta goes and acts accordingly, as usual. And you know, things change. It's as simple as that, really. Now, some of you have discovered something online about what might be next for X4. Proper announcements for that are also coming, but probably a little later this summer. Same story here. Things change, pieces are moving around, and when we start talking about it, we want to make sure you get the proper story, the full story, and not one that might set wrong expectations and cause frustration later on. Now, Enough with the intro. Today I've invited another colleague of mine to chat about a specific new gameplay feature that is coming soon to X4 Foundations. That guest is Owen, aka Xenon Slayer,
AKA
programmer
Bozo.
and part of the missions team at Egosoft. And you might recognize his voice when you hear it in a bit. This is episode 2 of the Inside Egosoft podcast on the custom game start.
Oh wow, fancy.
Welcome, Owen, and thanks for joining me for episode 2 of the Inside Egosoft podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Owen, for our listeners who don't follow you on Twitch already or haven't heard about you before, could you just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, my name's Owen, and I've been working with Egosoft for about 13 years.
Wow.
And I've spent a few good years in Germany in the office, but at the moment I'm back in England. I moved back a few years ago.
But basically still in the same role as you were before, right?
Yeah, I started with mission development, writing stories for Terran Conflict and X Rebirth, and now I'm kind of in a supporting role on the mission side because the team's grown. But yeah, I'm also generally just working on a multitude of things, not just missions, but yes, I've picked up a lot of stuff over the years.
Yeah, team's growing. That's a good part to know about. I talked about that with Beats. Some of you already know Beats. We talked about that on the Discord server. We were talking about the history of Egosoft, which was very interesting if you take a look at the releases they did. And after X2, they did immediately X3, which was 1 year later only. And then it kind of stopped for Egosoft. And they took about 3 years for the first DLC. And then they took additional 3 years for the next DLC. So they had 6 years sitting only with X3 and nothing else. And then it took another way longer amount to put out X4. But now with X4, things changed a little bit, I think. X4 is like designed from the start to make it easier to put new things into the game. So we had the drop of X4 late 2018. Then we had Split Vendetta. And then they had Cradle of Humanity early 2021. So they are back to a very dense release lineup. And that speaks for it that what Owen just said, that the team grows at the moment or is growing or was growing or whatever. They are working more on the games right now than they did back then. I think the time when they did X3, maybe they worked on something else, or maybe they worked as a contributor to other games, or made some things for other companies or whatever to just earn some money. It just feels like that, without knowing anything from whatever was going on inside of the company, but only seeing the release dates of the stuff that they put out. X3 was such a long time with so few releases that I cannot imagine a company running like that and being healthy financial wise. Oh, X Rebirth. Yeah. X Rebirth was also in there. Sorry, I forgot that. But that X Rebirth was in between the last DLC of X3 and X4. So there was a time when they did something weird and tried something else.
We have this traditional way, I want to say almost, of people joining Egosoft, where it's, obviously people that have played the X games before, but very specifically people that have been into modding and have been part of the community for years that then end up joining the company and working on it full time. Is that a similar story for you?
For sure. I started playing the X games back in, it must be 2001, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I started getting into the modding scene in X2, where we had the scripting in-game editor, which was one of my first forays into programming, and I really enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. And then when X3 came along, I jumped into the DevNet and started testing. So I got to see firsthand the feedback that we gave and the changes being made by the developers back then, and that got me interested in the whole process.
Cool. And of course, I guess most of the X4 players will have recognized your voice. You're the voice of Bozo in X4 Foundations. I was always interested in hearing how that came about.
Yeah, so for X3 Terran Conflict, which was my first proper project with Egosoft. That was when I moved out to Germany. That was just after I finished college. And I was the token
Wow.
English guy in the office. And I was in charge of not only doing some of the voice page writing and things like that, making sure that the scripts got to the recording studio that we had locally. I went there, met up with some of the actors and did a bit of directing, and then also just got involved myself with some of the English voice pages. Well, that was my first voice acting gig, and every now and again I do it again, but I think Bozo is the character that now stands out for everyone.
Right.
We can't stop using that guy. He has so much to say.
Yeah, I'm sure we will hear more from him in the future, right?
Yes, I'm sure.
Perfect.
Definitely.
So the main topic for today is a new feature that will very likely be introduced during the 4.10 beta phase. And we call it custom game start.
Whoa!
Among other things, some of that you have already mentioned. You've also been working on this. Could you give our listeners a short summary of what that new feature is?
Yeah, so in X4 and all the other X games, when you start a new game, you're usually presented with a number of game starts where we've tried to give you different avenues into the game depending on what your styles are, whether you want to be a trader or whether you want to jump into the story or you want to role play as a certain race, things like that. And what we want to give in 4.10 is a new editor that allows you to create your own game start within rules, and we want to give the player as much freedom as we can within those rules. So we're going to give them all kinds of options for them to set up a property and money and things like that.
Property,
So
money.
is that something that is like something completely new for the X series, or have we been doing something similar in previous X games before?
Yeah, I would say we've done things similar because in the past we've had in-game editors that were used for development, things like the Galaxy editor, where we put together the map, placed stations around, and that was also available for modders. But of course, that wasn't really something we presented to the players as an actual game feature. That was just a tool more than anything.
Which is still in there. I don't know how much I can talk about that, but of course, as a developer, you have way more tools to start a specific game with specific features in it, to test some stuff. And now they're just giving you this feature too with a limited range of things that you can change. Such as he just mentioned properties. Wait, properties and I forgot the second one.
Actually, in X3 Farnham's Legacy, which was recently released, that also has its own in-game game start editor. So that is presented to the player saying, if you want to mess around with the universe, your game start, then this is how you do it. And I've been playing around with that a little bit, and that's a bit of fun. But that does result in a modified game because you can do anything in there. You could give yourself a crazy big fleet.
Yeah, and the way I understand it, as the feature currently stands, so to say, as I mean, you and other team members are still working on it. We are right now like trying to find the balance of where the border is, so to say, between your save game still being unmodified, classified as unmodified, so to say.
Exactly.
Or if you move into the modified part. That's not right now fully defined, I think, and you guys are still working on that, right?
Yeah, so the way it's going to work is that as you progress through the game in your current save, you'll be unlocking like milestones, achievements, and we're going to be taking what you've done in the past and giving that to the editor, and then you'll get a budget to play with. And then you can, depending on what you've done in the past, whether it was a story decision, how much money you got, how big your fleet was, that will then affect different budgets. Within those budgets, you can play around and your game will not be modified. And then you can continue on into that new save. And yeah, whatever you decide to do, whether it's some crazy story combination that you've never done before, or putting up your home base in a different sector, there's a lot of different things we'll hopefully be able to present to the players.
And if I understand it correctly, like you just talked about the budgets, and those are categorized into specific groups of budgets, so to say, right?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how this is going to come across to the player, but there are going to be certain milestones that we define that give certain points to the budget, and things like whether you've had a 5-star pilot before, or whether you've wiped out a Xenon sector, which is probably a favorite of mine. We're going to put points to those, and like I said, the menu will then be able to categorize them and give you the budget that makes the most sense. So if you're very good at fighting, then maybe you'll be able to create a bigger fleet or things like that. Yeah, I think the one that because I'm working on missions, I'm most interested in the story aspect, where we have since I think it was 3.0 with the Paranid and the split story. We had storylines where you could branch off. You had decisions, and depending on what those decisions are, the universe would change. So what we want to do is, if you've taken one path, we'll allow you in the editor to then select the other path. And you can drastically change what the universe looks like at the game start, depending on these choices, what factions are around and who's at war with who, what factions are no longer around. So that's going to be really cool.
You're going to give us the option to tell... let's take it, not everything for granted right now, but interesting enough, the ability to choose who is at war with whom would be amazing. Like, I don't want to have a game start where I only choose which factions are good with me as a player, but that would be amazing if you could choose which factions are fighting each other. You want to have a full-scale war where everyone is fighting everyone? Or do you want to have a conflict with a border splitting the galaxy into half or something? That would be amazing. That would be a part where we could talk about RP in this case. Because you could start a completely messed up game, like everyone is fighting with everyone, or you take like, you know, I want to have Argon going with the split. It doesn't make any sense lore-wise, but hey, just give me the option. I want to have this part and this part of the galaxy working together. Everyone else around, like Paranid underneath, Taladi at the right, they're all enemies to us. And so we have two sides which fighting each other. I mean, we're still talking about a single-player game, then give us the option to mess around with our universe. We will not interfere with anybody else that is playing X4. So if you give us this option, let us go crazy.
I say it's an easy way into experiencing more of X4, like, or different areas of the game.
Yeah, not many people are going to see every part of the game, especially in one save game.
Right.
Depending on where you make your home base or whether you want to focus on a war in a certain area. Some players just don't care about fighting, but this would give them an opportunity to break out of their comfort zone, maybe throw themselves at a different problem. We like seeing people do new game starts. That's why we create loads of new game starts of loads of different scenarios. And yeah, I hope this, because it can put you in an advanced situation relatively easy, hopefully that means that more people will jump into it.
Let's be clear for a second, okay? A few game starts are not have a small trading ship and start with 15,000 credits, have a small fighter and start with 10,000 credits, and everything else is basically the same, you know? With the first game starts we had, not really any changes in there. Split Vendetta, a little bit. Cradle of Humanity, already a little bit more. Custom game starts, please. Completely different.
Start new games, just try out being a mogul with thousands of factories out there. Not saying that the editor's going to give you thousands of factories within the budget, but I mean, for myself, I never really get that far into X games where I have massive fleet.
Yeah,
you don't have time.
I've
you need to work.
Achieved enough for the menu to give me that, and then I can experience that finally.
From the feedback and the community stuff that I see, because it's, you know, that's part of my job, I always get the impression that the community is very much divided into those who really prefer sticking to their one save game for, let's say, as long as possible. And then you have the guys who are more comfortable with, let's say, jumping around or jumping into a new game to change the way that they approach stuff. you're not just a part of the development team, you're also still an avid player of X4. You do your own streams and everything. What's your favorite approach?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of starting fresh every now and again, because I really enjoy the early game. Ever since like starting the older games, I liked starting in a small ship and upgrading that ship, and the universe kind of opens up for you. You get all the different possibilities that you couldn't do with your start ship, mining, building a station for the first time, destroying bigger ships, capturing bigger ships. And I just like that progression. Of course, I've had games where I've had a big empire with factories and complexes, and I do enjoy making sure that things, run properly. But I'm always a very hands-on guy. I like being in a fighter ship. I like going up against other fighters or destroying surface elements and things like that. So I'm not really one of just sit back and throw a fleet at a problem. I like getting down and dirty with it.
Coming back to the actual custom game start, you're currently actually defining and implementing specifically those, let's say, points that you can get from certain progress that you've made in the game, and then in result of that, what you will be able to change in the custom game start, right? Like what players will get and what they can customize eventually. Could you take us into that thought process a bit? Like, how do you decide such things? And maybe what are some of the things that you, as Owen, when you're doing this, need to consider while doing so?
Yeah, so of course there's so many different things that you can do in the X Games, and we break it down as trade, fight, build, think usually, but that doesn't really translate to what this menu wants to show, whether... like what is think. We'll probably replace that with the story choices you've made along the way, things like that. But when it comes to what you achieve in the game and what it unlocks, we tried to make sense of it, but we're still just putting a few achievements in a place and saying, oh, that sounds like it would unlock this. So it's a bit of a creative thing. It's like coming up with new achievements like we've done in the last few years. And it's a fun thing to do. We've always had statistics that you can look at in the game, but now we're just trying to pick those out and just present it in a way that makes sense in a menu to what the player would think it makes sense to. So how much money you've earned, how much money you get in a game start, things like that.
When we say achievements, we don't mean Steam achievements, right? There's nothing that the player actually unlocks that will pop up somewhere. It's more like an internal thing.
That's true. Sometimes they go hand in hand. Like when you do a story choice, you'll probably get this, let's call it a milestone for the game start budget, and an achievement will pop up at the same time.
Oh, okay, I see.
That was an easy way of just saying, oh, we need a good place to unlock this. We already have achievements. It always helps to half the amount of work if you've already done it.
Oh, sure, of course. Well, thanks a lot for the details, Owen. It sounds really cool, and I'm sure our listeners will be very eager to try it out once it's included in the 4.10 beta.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Well, I think it's important to link it with the other feature that was mentioned on the previous podcast. The whole reason why we want to have custom game starts that aren't modified is so that more people will have a chance to jump into the new ventures.
Yeah.
And of course, unmodified saves are always more fun to debug than modified saves. So that's always a bonus on my side.
Okay. Thanks for taking the time for this chat, Owen.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is that it, or are you saying something else, Greg?
So those were some first details on the custom game start feature, and we hope you're looking forward to trying it out and playing around with it, experiencing X4 Foundations in different and new ways. As of right now, it looks like the custom game start may not be included in the first beta version of 4.10, but as I mentioned already in this episode's intro, we regularly update the public beta once it has started and change things in between those phases. So at some point during the 4.10 beta, the custom game start feature will pop up and you'll be able to give it a go. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Inside Egosoft podcast, and also thank you for your feedback so far on the first episode. I read everything attentively and I tried to optimize some things here and there. This time around, for example, we have a short summary text on today's topic that will be released as a news item on Steam, our website, etc., so that you can already get a general idea of what is being talked about in the episode. Of course, when you hear me say this, you've already listened to the episode, so yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, please subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast app, or
Do that.
find us on youtube.com/Egosoft, where you can also subscribe to our channel.
Link in the description
and
down
like
below.
individual videos. Consider writing a review for X4 Foundations on Steam or if you haven't already.
Yeah, do that.
It really does help. Thank you in advance.
It really does help.
Thanks for
It
tuning
really.
in, and talk to you soon for the next episode of Inside Egosoft.
Bye,
This is
Greg.
Signing off.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much. Cool. It's 2 big features, not in the beta. Well, not in the first beta. And that means that we, again, will have a beta phase like we had before with 4.0, for example. Like, how many betas we had there? 10, 11, something like that. And that means that we have at least minimum 3 different ones. The one that has no feature in it, the one that has got the custom game starts in it, and the one that has got the multiverse player seasons in it. So at least 3, but I think more like 6 or something like that. 6 to 8 maybe. Yeah, but what can they do with the custom game starts? Like, I had the pleasure to already see some of these things. I mean, there are already some mods that also give you this ability. And when I'm quickly thinking about things that you could possibly do at the custom game start, is like, how much money do you have? Which race is your player person, or you know, your personality or your persona in the game? Which starting ship do you have? Which ships do you have other than your starting ship? Do you have a player HQ? Do you have other stations than the player HQ? Can you use these stations out of your construction plans, maybe even? So we have a station designer game start where you could design stations, and that way you could design a station before going into a game, then add it as your starting station. That would be extremely OP if you could add a full massive self-sustaining shipyard, for example. In relation to other factions, we heard maybe we got faction relations between each other. What would be insanely good if you could just like give us a drop-down menu, ally or foe, for every single, like make it a matrix, you know, Taladi, Argon, Terran, and then here Taladi, Argon, Terran. Just make it a matrix, and the drop-down menu, friend, foe, friend, foe, friend, foe, whatever. That could be a thing. Starting sector could be also a thing. Where do we start, in which sector? What should we have in our inventory? That could be also something, but I don't think they will add that. What do you have in your inventory? Because that's, I don't know, that feels weird. Also, Sita, I can maybe think about starting with or without Sita. Maybe that's a check mark. If you've acquired that once, that you don't have to farm it again. Story-wise, yes, of course, they said when you completed the story, you should be able to also enable the other part of the story, but actually I don't know if that's good to implement. I don't think so. Also, what about factions like, for example, the Cabal, which are not there, only there if you completed the story and did some specific route. Also, what about the Buccaneers, which are also not there at the start? Where or how do the Yaki start? And then we have still the one thing that is never being touched, Xenon and Kark at -30. Why not question that? I don't know. That could be a thing, could also not be a thing. Or if you start as a Yaki, have the Xenon at -15, stuck at -15 and instead of -30. You cannot use anything from the Xenon, but the Xenon are not fighting you. They won't attack you actively, but they won't do anything with you. I'm just guessing. Like, I'm trying to let my mind open for everything. What else could we possibly do? Since Egosoft is already eager to implement mods into their game, like recently with the escape pod mod that they basically added into the game, why not add no highways into the game? I mean, this is not really a cheat if you make your game harder for yourself. Again, just guessing. It's a mod, a lot of people like it, but also a lot of people use it with other mods like VRO, for example, or some speed modifications or whatever. Like I said, the stations that you use in or the stations that you could bring into the game are these fixed stations. Do you have a choice of stations? What kind of blueprints can you use? Do you need to have a safe game where you actually bought a shipyard to use a shipyard? Are you even able to build a shipyard at the start? There should be also limitations to that, because otherwise you can just throw in a shipyard and then you're like, okay, well, let's print some money and just stay there in Sita. Anyway, very interesting, and we'll see whatever the custom game starts will bring at. We're excited. Oh, and by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. And have a look at the merch, which is off in June, 15% off with promo code BDAY34. And also don't forget about Astraea. Astraea is out now. It's free to read, free to download on my website, spaceoperationsdelta.com. Thank you so much, and see you on twitch.tv/CaptainCollins.